Microsoft did something not awful, kind of. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt here. LinkedIn will soon use your data for AI. OnePlus phones had a weird vulnerability, and more. Welcome to Surveillance Report 242 IRL version. In real life, we are together. We're in Berlin as part of the Nextcloud conference, and we are still here to keep you private and secure with the news from the last week. And I'm sure maybe we can make a creative choice maybe to make like less cuts this week, like, you know, more organic, like we're kind of just in person. And
no promises.
We'll see. Okay, I'm Henry from Techlore.
I'm Nathan from The New Oil.
And we don't have a sponsor this week. We just wanted to shout out the fact that we have Patreon, we have LibrePay, we have Monero, and XMR Chat. We were talking in person about maybe simplifying some of this to make it easier for you guys to kind of select where to go, especially now that we added Ghost. The goal isn't to remove anything, but we still currently will have all the options for you, and we're just going to make it simpler. Check out all those ways to support the podcast down in the description. And the way we're able to be so picky with sponsors and turn so many people down is because of you all, and it's a really cool position to be in. So thank you all for the support that you give us.
Hey guys, quick update from Future Nate here. So because we were both clearly traveling, I was not in my usual setup. Long story short, there is a little bit of interference on some of the audio parts. I'm pretty sure I got the worst of it, and what remains is not too bad and very brief, but I do apologize in advance. It's one of those things that we had no way of knowing it was happening during recording. I didn't hear it until we went back in editing, so apologies. Everything should be back to normal in our next episode. Thank you guys so much for your patience with all this crazy travel that's been going on. We really appreciate you guys.
So the first story is about Microsoft and how they are now extending their Windows 10 security updates. So a bit of context here. Microsoft has been really trying to push in a direction of ending Windows 10 security update support. And their initial thing was just to cut off Windows 10 altogether and give you guys no options and force you to go to Windows 11 if you still want security updates, which pretty much makes a lot of people insecure because Microsoft and Windows has one of the least successful abilities to actually get users on the newest version of Windows when they do major upgrades. So they paywalled it, and they said, well, now, you know, everyone's outraged. I think it was $30 a year, $35 a year.
I think it was 30.
Yeah, they say here 30 in the article, so $30 a year. Now, after more outrage, because who's going to pay $30 a year to still receive security updates, they now are decided to make it free, at least for the first year. In response to these concerns, Microsoft informed European users that essential security updates will be extended for 1 year at no additional cost, provided they log in with a Microsoft account. Big asterisk there at the end, because I know many of you and our listeners probably don't want to do that. Now, they do say in the US, a similar free option will allow users to upload their Windows 10 profiles to Microsoft's backup service and receive security updates for up to 1 year. I don't quite know what that is as someone who doesn't use Microsoft stuff. Do you know what that is?
What do you mean? To the backup services?
Yeah. Upload their Windows 10 profiles to Microsoft backup service and receive security updates for up to 1 year.
It's a good question because I don't have a Microsoft account on my computer, so I'm not familiar with that either.
Yeah. So if any of you are Microsoft users and you understand what they're referring to, please let us know in the comments. But it seems like there is a way for also in the US for you to have a similar kind of free option to still get extended security updates. Yeah, and just to kind of reiterate what I was saying earlier, there's a stat from the article that according to US-based Consumer Reports, an estimated 650 million people worldwide were still using Windows 10 as of August 2025. So again, when Apple does updates for things like iOS, they actually typically have very high percentages of people who upgrade to the newest version. Windows does not see that as much. So when they're doing this kind of stuff, it really does leave a lot of people in the dark on basic security. So this is a small win because it means all of you still have a year to get security updates and still stay on Windows 10. But do keep in mind, they move the goalposts so much with this, where it's like, oh, wow, they're just giving us a year of security updates. That's actually a big win, even though they still said it's just for a year, and they're probably going to try to charge again. And yeah, those are all my thoughts on this.
Let's see. Henry mentioned there's like a $30 fee that you could pay, or you could also redeem 1,000 Microsoft reward points, which are, quote, earned through activity on the company's platforms.
Oh, is that like Bing rewards?
I guess.
Oh, God.
I think you can also like pay to get points, you know, like any pay to play game. But yeah, so I mean, there's a few options here, but none of them are really great. To Microsoft's defense, and this is the only defense I'm going to give them, Windows 11 has been out for like 5 years now. It's been out for a long time. Like, people have had plenty of opportunity to move. And to be fair, it's one of those things that you know that it's coming regardless. On the other hand, Microsoft has done a lot of things like require the use of the TPM chip, require certain hardware, things that arguably aren't really that necessary. Like, sure, they do add some extra security, but to like basically say like you have to have this and you can't update is kind of creating an unnecessary barrier to entry in our opinion, I think. These are extensions, but they're kind of unfair extensions. Like, oh, you can have those things for free if you make a Microsoft account. We all know once you make a Microsoft account, Windows already doesn't have a lot of privacy, and now it's going to get even worse because it's going to be reporting everything to Microsoft. It's going to be saving everything on Microsoft servers, which when you think about that, that is a really weird, like, oh, in the US, you can do it as long as you allow users to upload their profiles to the backup service. Like, that's kind of a weird thing when you think about it. Probably obvious, but I think right now there's a big push worldwide to at least appear like governments are cracking down on a lot of antitrust behaviors. So that's probably what Microsoft is doing here, is trying to like pretend like they're not screwing over consumers. But at the end of the day, I think they still are. I mean, Henry and I have said this 1,000 times. We are totally in favor of Linux if you can. You don't need to buy a new computer for that. If it can run Windows 10, it can definitely run most versions of Linux. For people where that's not an option, you could try dual booting, or if you must upgrade to Windows 10, there's a lot of really good tools out there to help make it a little bit more private. Definitely not as private as something like Linux, but you know, there's Oh No, Shut Up 10, there's W10 Privacy, there's privacy.sexy or whatever, which I still insist is a terrible name, but there's a lot of options out there that'll help reduce a lot of the telemetry. Portmaster from Safing will help a little bit. Or of course, you could switch to a Mac, which is still not as private as Linux, but it's certainly a lot more private than a Windows computer, and I don't think anybody would argue that.
And good security update support.
Yeah, great security, but you know, pros and cons with everything. So yeah, it's good to see that Microsoft is offering arguably a little bit more flexibility, but certainly not by much, I would say. With the headline story out of the way, we're going to move into our data breaches, and we're going to start off with Boyd Gaming, who has disclosed a data breach after suffering a cyber attack. So this is a public U.S. casino entertainment company with 28 gaming properties in 10 states like Nevada, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Louisiana, and a whole bunch of more. They are also the management of a tribal casino in Northern California, and they employ over 16,000 people and made almost $4 billion in 2024. So the threat actors were able to steal data from the company's systems, which includes information about employees and individuals. Unfortunately, Bleeping Computer contacted Boyd Gaming with questions, but received no response, or at least at the time of publication. So we don't know exactly what was taken or how many people were impacted, but we do know it does include employee and individual data.
Yeah, so then we have automaker giant Stellantis, I believe is how you say that. They had a data breach, that's for sure. And this is from a Salesforce hack. I believe it's an extension of the one that we've been covering on this podcast, the Salesforce situation. So they own 14 major brands, including Alfa Romeo, Chrysler, Citroën, Dodge, DS Automobiles, Fiat, Jeep, Lancia, Maserati, Opel, and Vol, and it operates manufacturing facilities across Europe, North America, South America, other regions with operations in over 130 countries. So there was a statement published over the weekend that attackers only stole customer contact information during the breach, since the compromised platform was not used to store financial or other sensitive personal information. Now, there was actually someone who claimed responsibility for this, unlike the last data breach, and they are called Shiny Hunters. And they told Bleeping Computer that they had stolen over 18 million Salesforce records, including names and contact details from the company's Salesforce instance. So we've actually been seeing, in the article here that I'm highlighting, if you're on video, on audio, pretty much Salesforce had this data breach, and this is part of that wave of Salesforce data breaches because a lot of people depend on Salesforce for their product, and it was leaking information, and a lot of people are exploiting this right now. So we'll probably get a few more.
And then in what was probably an inevitable story. So for those of you who didn't hear, there was a new app this week called Neon that went a little bit viral. Basically, the selling point was it records your phone calls, and then they pay you to submit that audio to AI companies so they can train their AI models. I think with our audience, that's kind of a given how we feel about that. But I guess, if you really need money, I guess it's an easy way to make money if you're making a lot of phone calls. But anyways, the app has gone dark after exposing users' phone numbers, call records, and transcripts. The app already had thousands of users and was downloaded 75,000 times yesterday alone at the time of publication of the article. TechCrunch basically they said that the founder took down the app servers and began notifying users about pausing the app, but fell short of informing them about the security lapse. At fault was the fact that Neon's app servers were not preventing any logged in user from accessing someone else's data. So basically, TechCrunch used Burp Suite, which is kind of like Wireshark, I think, probably does some other stuff, but they did traffic analysis on the app and they saw that there was a web address associated with the call transcripts. So when they went to that web address, they realized that they could just view anybody's transcripts without any kind of login or anything. And quoting the article again, they said, similarly, the servers could be manipulated to reveal the most recent call records, such as metadata from any users. And the metadata contain the user's phone number of the person they're calling, when the call was made, the duration, and how much money each call earned. A review of a handful of transcripts and audio files suggests some users may be using the app to make lengthy calls that covertly record real-world conversations with other people in order to generate money through the app.
Thousands of Indian bank transfer records were found spilling online after a security lapse. This is a pretty quick one here. So researchers at a cybersecurity firm, UpGuard, discovered in late August that there was a publicly accessible Amazon-hosted storage server containing over 270,000 PDF documents relating to bank transfers of Indian customers. The data was linked to at least 38 different banks and financial institutions, and the spilling data was eventually plugged, but the researchers said they could not identify the source of the link. We got a lot of weird, we don't know. Well, stories.
Surprisingly, I think the bank that was responsible for that did come forward, which is really weird. You don't usually see that. But yeah, the researchers weren't able to figure out who it was without the bank owning up to it. That'll take us into the company section. And we already covered the Windows 10 story as our headline story. So we just have one quick story from LinkedIn, who will soon use your data to train AI. Here's what you can do to opt out. Real quick, this blog comes from Proton, and I just want to give credit where credit's due. I feel like they've been getting a lot better about their blog posts lately. For a while, every single one of their blog posts was basically just a marketing puff piece. Don't get me wrong, they still definitely put at the end, you should use Proton. And I don't blame them for that, but I feel like they're not all great, but they're getting a lot better.
You know what they need to do? And I genuinely, please, Proton, if you're listening to this, separate different RSS feeds, please. I just want to follow your news. I want to get your good blogs like this, actual news about what's going on in privacy. There should be and maybe there is, and maybe I just haven't found it, but there should be in the news blog RSS feed, and then Proton updates RSS feed, so I can just keep up with Proton updates, and then all the marketing stuff can be a different RSS link. I think that'd be great, because that's actually why it frustrates me so much, because I just want the Proton news and the stuff that you cover, and I don't want the email templates. The reason they're doing these blogs is for SEO. People who are looking for email templates will now find Proton through their blog. And I think that's a net benefit for the privacy community. So when I say this, I get what they're doing. And so this is what we do here. On this podcast, it's what I do at Techlore. We aim to reach people on YouTube. We publish to YouTube. YouTube is where everyone is. We're trying to get into that YouTube demographic. But guess what? We also upload to PeerTube. And if you're already on PeerTube, you just follow us via RSS on PeerTube. And because you're in our safe space now. Does that make sense? And yeah. I feel right now, I don't feel like I'm in the safe space of Proton's RSS feed. This is what I'm saying. I'm getting all the stuff that's designed for people who have never even heard of Proton before. And I just want a safe space as a Proton user already who just wants to keep up with Proton stuff. Is that good feedback? I think that's good feedback. We should leave this in.
On to the actual article. I made myself a note here in the show notes that I'm not sure if we've covered this before or not, because it sounds really familiar, but if we didn't cover it, it's really important. So I apologize if this is a repeated story, but the basic takeaway is towards the beginning of the article. It says, on November 3rd, LinkedIn will begin sharing your data with Microsoft and its affiliates for AI training. You're opted in by default, but there is still time to do something about it. The article has screenshots and everything on go here, click this option. Henry's scrolling. If you're watching video, you can see. If you're on audio, it's in the show notes. So yeah, if you are forced to use LinkedIn for whatever reason, definitely go check that out and opt out and try to keep an eye on it, because Microsoft is one of those companies that has a habit of changing your settings regularly without telling you.
Yes.
So this might get changed back in 6 months.
Yes. And for audio listeners, it's settings and privacy, and then data privacy, and then data for generative AI improvement. And then you toggle off use my data for training content creation AI models. And there's more, actually. You have to data objection.
There's 2 different spots.
This is intentional poor design. So just so people, LinkedIn does crap like this. If you ever have tried to disable LinkedIn notifications so they don't send you emails, you would know that this is very intentional dark patterns, because they have probably 30 different toggles for different notifications, and they're all under submenus. So you can't just turn off all notifications for LinkedIn. You have to go into a submenu, which then you have to toggle off like 3 things. And then you have to close that submenu, open another submenu, toggle off like 4 things. And there's like 8 different submenus. And then you know what they do? I start getting emails from LinkedIn like 3 months later.
They turned them all back on?
No, because they start adding a new thing. It's like, oh, we have a new feature which has its own new notification system, and we turn it on by default. So yeah, anyway, they're going to add another AI feature in a couple months, which you're also going to have to opt out of. So do this once and get ready to do it again. This next one is actually pretty interesting. It regards OnePlus devices. So there's an unpatched flaw in OnePlus phones that lets rogue apps spy on text messages, I assume. If you're an iOS user on the Android side of things, if you buy a stock Pixel from Google, there's like Google's native version of Android. But if you buy it from Samsung, they have their own skinned version of Android, essentially. One UI, I believe is what they call that. And then OnePlus has Oxygen OS. Pretty much every company has their own brand of Android, which has different features and different interfaces, and sometimes their own software that can have their own vulnerabilities, which I'm about to discuss. So what this did is it allowed any installed app to access SMS data and metadata without requiring permission or user interaction. So this is because they changed the stock Android telephony package to introduce additional exported content providers like push message provider, push shop provider, and service number provider. The manifest for these providers does not declare a write permission for a read SMS, leaving it open to any app by default, even those that don't have SMS permissions. To make matters worse, client-supplied inputs aren't sanitized, allowing blind SQL injection that could reconstruct SMS content from the device database, brute forcing one character at a time. This is very technical stuff. Again, this is in the research section, so this is above my pay grade as well. So definitely check it out if you want to like maybe learn a little bit more. And so to dive into it, the researchers tried to contact OnePlus to share their findings on May 1st and followed up on an alternative email address multiple times until August 16th. Shortly after publication of Rapid7's report, OnePlus acknowledged the disclosure and said they have launched an investigation into the problem. Until a patch is made available, it is recommended to keep the number of installed apps on your OnePlus device to a minimum. Only trust reputable publishers and switch from SMS-based 2FA to OTP apps like Google Authenticator, or we would recommend NTAuth, ProtonAuth, Aegis if you just want something local, or even your local password manager. And then it says, since SMS isn't properly isolated on OnePlus devices, sensitive communications should only occur on end-to-end encrypted apps.
This next research story is, I don't know if there's any takeaway. I guess we'll find out. But it says this Microsoft Entra ID vulnerability could have been catastrophic. So this comes from Ars Technica, I believe. Oh, Wired. And it says it's known as Entra ID, the system that stores each Azure Cloud customer's user identity, sign-in access controls, applications, and subscription management tools. The researcher has studied Entra ID security in depth and published multiple studies about weaknesses in the system, which was formerly known as Azure Active Directory. But while preparing to present at Black Hat Security Conference in July, the researcher discovered 2 vulnerabilities that he realized could be used to gain global administrator privileges, aka God mode, and compromise every Entra ID directory, or what is known as a tenant. The researcher says that this would have exposed nearly every ID tenant in the world other than possibly government cloud infrastructures. The researcher said, from my own tenants, my test tenant, or even a trial tenant, you could request these tokens, and you can impersonate basically anybody and anybody else's tenant. That means you can modify other people's configuration, create new and admin users in that tenant, and do anything you would like. Given the seriousness of the vulnerability, the researcher disclosed his findings to Microsoft's Security Response Center on July 14th, the same day that he discovered the flaws. Microsoft started investigating the findings that day and issued a fix on July 17th. The company confirmed that the issue was fixed by July 23rd and implemented extra security measures in August. They issued a CVE for the vulnerability on September 4th. So there's more details in the article, but those are kind of the core. It's kind of the core of the story is there was this vulnerability.
This one's a big one, big story.
Oh, this came from a listener. So,
And it came from a listener. It has a lot of quotes, so there might be some reading here, but it's a pretty interesting one for sure. So there's a massive leak that shows how a Chinese company is exporting the Great Firewall to the rest of the world.
For anybody who doesn't know about the Great Firewall, I mean, you've probably heard of it if you're in privacy communities because it's pretty well known, but China has this really comprehensive digital censorship system, at least for the internet. I've heard conflicting reports about the social scores and how well those are implemented uniformly, but for the internet, they have this really, for lack of a better word, impressive way to monitor the internet and restrict access to certain websites, and it's called the Great Firewall of China. That's what Westerners call it, as kind of a dig, but yeah, so that's what they're referring to when they say it works like that.
This was from 100,000 documents that show that there is a Chinese company that's been quietly selling censorship systems seemingly modeled on the Great Firewall to governments everywhere else. So they're called Greege Networks.
No.
Oh, Geej. Thank you. And they were founded in 2018, and they count the father of China's massive censorship infrastructure as one of its investors. Styles itself as a network monitoring provider, offering business-grade cybersecurity tools to gain comprehensive visibility and minimize security risks for its customers. Researchers actually found that it's operating a sophisticated system that allows users to monitor online information, block certain websites and VPN tools, and spy on specific individuals. The researchers reviewed the leaked material, and they found that the company is able to package advanced surveillance capabilities into this commercialized version of essentially the Great Firewall of China. And this is both via hardware that can be installed at data centers and by software that can be used by local government officers. And there's many documents that show how they kind of pull this off. So apparently they entered operation in Kazakhstan, Ethiopia, Pakistan, and Myanmar. Thank you. As well as apparently another unidentified country. So a public job posting shows that they're also looking for engineers who can travel and spread the software and hardware. So the researchers kind of came together, and there's some quotes from them. This is not like lawful interception that every country does, including Western democracies. They say that the surveillance system that they're selling gives so much power to the government that really nobody should have. This is very frightening. And then they said if this content is properly encrypted through the transport layer security protocol, the system uses deep packet inspection and machine learning techniques to extract metadata from the encrypted traffic and predict whether it's going through a censorship circumvention tool like a VPN. If it can't distinguish the content of the encrypted traffic, the system can also opt to flag it as suspicious and block it for a period of time. They did say that there's a screenshot of the dashboard from the Geej software that shows the system is monitoring 81 million internet connections simultaneously. While it can theoretically be scaled even larger with more hardware, this could be used for a lot of people. The prioritization list of tools includes mostly popular commercial services like ExpressVPN, Signal. The leaked documents contain no record of business contracts. It discusses the client's encryptic code names. They were able to pin down 4, and this is, I guess, why they didn't know what the unidentified country was, because they were able to pin down 4 of the foreign governments to Kazakhstan, which was K18 and K24, Pakistan, which is P19, Ethiopia, which is E21, and Myanmar, which was M22, by just combing through the documents and the leaks for mentions of data centers' geographic locations. So they must have not been able to do that with the unidentified one. There's a lot of other things, where I'm trying to keep it as brief as I can, but there's a lot of other not great things. Like there's a reputation score that goes along with this. It can filter individual traffic from individuals. It can get metadata, things like IP addresses, attachments, protocols, content of what you're sending. It's bad stuff. So that's the short end of it. One interesting aspect of this is that in Pakistan, they actually had a similar company that was doing something like Geej was doing, but it was a Canadian company that supplied deep packet inspection gear before withdrawing under U.S. sanctions. Now, when they left, its hardware remained in the data centers, but Geej moved in to repurpose the existing infrastructure, offering a transition to a new regime of censorship, one that would eventually run on Chinese manufactured hardware. The company's ability and willingness to work with the hardware left by Sandvine should pose a warning for countries issuing export licenses for sensitive tech. Once it's exported, it's there, and they're going to reuse it in some capacity.
With that, we'll move into the politics section, and this next story says Department of Homeland Security has been collecting U.S. citizens' DNA for years. According to newly released government data analyzed by Georgetown's Law Center on Privacy and Technology, DHS, which oversees Customs and Border Patrol, collected the DNA of nearly 2,000 U.S. citizens between 2020 and 2024 and had it sent to CODIS, the FBI's nationwide system for police investigations. An estimated 95 were minors, some as young as 14. The entries also include travelers never charged with a crime and dozens of cases where agents left the charges field blank. In other files, officers invoked civil penalties as justification for swabs that federal law reserves for criminal arrests. The findings appear to point to a program running outside the bounds of statute or oversight, according to experts, with CBP officers exercising broad discretion to capture genetic material from Americans and have it funneled into the law enforcement database designed in part for convicted offenders. DHS, according to researchers, has contributed roughly 2.6 million profiles to CODIS since 2020, which is way above earlier projections. By 2024, the detainee index contained over 2.3 million profiles. By 2025, it had already climbed to 2.6. Nearly all of these samples were collected under civil, not criminal authority. They said 97%. At the current pace, according to estimates, the files alone could account for 1/3 of CODIS by 2034. The expansion has been driven by specific legal and bureaucratic levers. So first of all, there was an April 2020 Justice Department rule that revoked a long-standing waiver allowing DHS to skip DNA collection from immigration detainees, effectively greenlighting mass sampling. Later that summer, the FBI signed off on rules that let police booking stations run arrestee cheek swabs through rapid DNA machines. Former FBI Director Christopher Wray warned during Senate testimony in 2023 that the flood of DNA samples from DHS threatened to overwhelm the Bureau's systems. The 2020 rule change, he said, had pushed the FBI from a historic average of a few thousand monthly submissions to 92,000 per month. Under Trump's renewed executive order on border enforcement signed in January of this year, DHS agents were instructed to deploy, quote, any available technologies to verify family ties and identity, a directive that explicitly covered genetic testing. And this month, federal officers announced that they were soliciting new bids to install rapid DNA at local booking facilities around the country, with combined awards of up to $3 million available.
This next one is going over to the UK. So new digital ID will be mandatory to work in the UK. Keir Starmer said that the new digital ID scheme would make it tougher to work in the UK illegally and offer countless benefits to citizens, while his senior minister, Darren Jones, said it could be the bedrock of the modern state. However, opposition parties argued the proposals would not stop people crossing the channel in small boats. So Labour believes its new proposal has public support, although more than 1 million have signed a petition against the idea. Conservative leader Kemai Badenoch, he's also expressed concern about the security of the data, saying it would be a risk to put the information in one database. Some campaign groups have also objected to the plan, with Liberty arguing it raised huge concerns about mass surveillance, while Big Brother Watch said it would make the country less free. The government has said it wants to ensure the scheme works for those who are not able to use a smartphone and will launch a consultation on how the service will be delivered later this year. The consultation is expected to last 3 months, with the legislation being introduced in Parliament early next year. There will be no requirement for individuals to carry their ID or be asked to produce it. However, digital ID will be mandatory as a means of proving right to work in the UK by the end of the Parliament, expected to be 2029 at the latest. The new digital ID will be held on people's phones in a similar way to contactless payment cards or the NHS app. It is expected to include a person's name, date of birth, nationality, or residency status, and a photo. The consultation will also consider whether additional information such as an address should be included. The government said the rollout would eventually make it simpler to apply for services like driver's licenses, childcare, and welfare, as well as streamlining access to tax records.
Our next story comes from Vietnam. This is a relatively quick one. Vietnam shuts down millions of bank accounts over biometric rules. As of September 1st, 2025, banks across Vietnam are closing accounts deemed inactive or non-compliant with new biometric rules. Authorities estimate that more than 86 million accounts out of roughly 200 million are at risk if users fail to update their new identity verification. Basically, the bank, they're now requiring, as it says, I think it's Face ID, face scan in order to have a bank account. The state bank has also introduced stricter thresholds for transactions, so facial authentication is mandatory for online transfers above 10 million VND, which is about $379 US. Cumulative daily transfers of over 20 million, or $758 US, also require biometric approval. The policy is part of the bank's broader cashless strategy aimed at combating fraud, identity theft, and deepfake-enabled scams. While many Vietnamese citizens have already updated their biometric data without issue, the measure has disproportionately affected foreign residents and expatriates who cannot easily return to local branches, and dormant accounts that have been left inactive for years.
This one's from Reuters. TikTok collected sensitive data on Canadian children. There was an investigation done in Canada that found that hundreds of thousands of Canadian children access TikTok each year, despite the company stating its platform is not intended for people under the age of 13. The investigation also found that TikTok had collected sensitive personal information from a large number of Canadian children and used it for online marketing and content targeting. In response, TikTok agreed to enhance age assurances to keep underage users off the platform and improve its communication so that users, particularly younger ones, understand how their data is used. The company also agreed to change throughout the course of the investigation. They include preventing advertisers from targeting users under 18 now, except based on general categories such as language and approximate location, and expanding the privacy information available to Canadian users.
And then one more quick TikTok story. So apparently it does look like TikTok is going to be in some way, shape, or form sold to the U.S., quote unquote, allegedly. So the headline says TikTok algorithm to be retrained on U.S. user data under Trump deal. So the algorithm, which is of course what determines what users see in their feed, will be copied and retrained using US user data as part of the deal. The White House said on Monday that TikTok's recommendation system will be audited by Oracle and operated by a new joint venture involving US investors in order to meet requirements for the app's sale. It's unclear whether the Chinese government has approved the agreement or begun to take regulatory steps required to deliver it. Data belonging to the 170 million users TikTok says it has in the US is already held on Oracle servers under an existing arrangement called Project Texas.
Okay, this story I was really excited about. So this is the open source section of the podcast, and it's Signal. They got secure backups. We did miss this last week, so apologies in advance. But after careful design and development, they're now starting to roll out secure backups, which is an opt-in feature. The first phase is available in the latest beta release for Android. This will let them further test the feature in a limited setting before it rolls out to iOS and desktop in the near future. This is a subscription service. I believe they do have a free version, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, beyond 45 days.
Yeah, so there is free. Okay, last 45 days worth of media free. Okay, so this is an automated way to back up all of your Signal messages to the cloud. Okay, you're going, oh my God, this sounds awful. Okay. All right, relax. Everyone take a deep breath together. Let's walk through this. First off, same zero-knowledge technology that enables Signal groups to work without revealing intimate metadata. So you're still getting the same exact tech that makes Signal Signal. And the backup archives are stored without a direct link to even a specific backup payment or Signal user account. So they're stored independently of however you're using Signal otherwise. At the core of secure backups is a 64-character recovery key that is generated on your device, right? On your device. This key is yours and yours alone. It is never shared with Signal servers, and your recovery key is the only way to unlock your backup when you need to restore access to your messages. Losing it means losing access to your backup permanently, and Signal cannot help you recover it. You can generate a new key if you choose. They recommend storing this key securely, like writing it down in a notebook or a secure password manager. Because your secure backup archive is refreshed daily, anything you deleted in the past 24 hours or any messages set to disappear are removed from the latest daily secure backup archive as you intended. And then if you want beyond 45 days of history, the paid subscription is simply $1.99 per month. And I would like to remind you, if you don't like this, it's actually opt-in by default. So it's not on by default.
It says Bitwarden upholds high security standards with annual third-party audits. So they audited the marketing website, the mobile app, the web app and network, and the mobile app and SDK. And this was, they say for 2024, so I'm guessing this is like from last year's stuff. But there were several issues found. Most of them were low or informational. A few of them were medium. There was nothing high or severe. And most of them were fixed. That includes all the medium issues were fixed. And the ones that weren't fixed, they explained why they didn't fix them. So yeah, if you're interested.
Cyber attack has disrupted check-in systems at major European airports. Fortunately, I don't think either of us were impacted by this.
No, most of the carriers said they had workarounds. And I think this is mostly over by this point too.
This was targeting check-in and boarding systems, and it disrupted air traffic and caused delays at several of Europe's major airports. This was initially reported at Brussels, Berlin's Brandenburg, and then London's Heathrow airports, meant that only manual check-in and boarding was possible. Many other European airports said their operations were unaffected. Many other European airports said they were unaffected. So Collins Aerospace, whose systems help passengers check themselves in, print boarding passes and bag tags, and dispatch their luggage, cited a cyber-related disruption to its Muse, which is multi-user system environment software at select airports. It was not immediately clear who might be behind this, but experts said it could turn out to be hackers, criminal organizations, or state actors. Police have arrested someone in the UK.
Yeah, that was like a separate story that popped up later, so I don't think we have more details on that. Oh, an RTX ransomware suspect. So yeah, we're kind of still, details are still coming out. This is like literally, I was at dinner last night and they were still covering like drone stuff happening at airports and stuff. So this is still like pretty breaking news here in Europe for sure.
That's it for the week. Thank you all for listening. Microsoft did something not awful, though, as we covered, the goalposts have been moved many times, and not awful has also been moved as a goalpost many times. LinkedIn will soon use your data for AI, and they'll probably release another version of that soon as well. OnePlus phones had a weird vulnerability, so definitely check that out, especially if you use a OnePlus device, and a lot more. We want to thank you all for listening to Surveillance Support. And are you doing the promo, or
Sure.
do you still do that? Okay.
I think so. So yeah, just a reminder that, like Henry said, we are able to be selective with our sponsors, and we don't have a sponsor right now. We're not really sweating it because we have you guys, and we're really grateful for that. So if you get a lot of value out of this podcast, we would really appreciate your support if you're able to. We do have Patreon. We are still working on Ghost. There's progress being made there, so that's up and running. You can sign up right now if you want to, and you'll be ready as soon as things get worked out and you'll start getting all that right in your podcast feed. There's LibrePay if you're not really interested in getting any perks and you just want something simple that's recurring donations. Or we do have Monero. You can tip us Monero directly, or you can go to xmrchat.com/surveillance report or surveillance pod and ask us a question there as a one-time support method. So thank you for those of you who do support, although you're not hearing this if that's the case. Or I guess if you give Monero, you probably are in LibrePay. So yeah, thanks to those who do support, and thanks for keeping us going.
The last thing that we'll say is any of you don't have to, financially support us. There's tons of free ways to support us. Just liking the video is a big deal. Leaving a comment, engaging with not just like the community in the comments, but also with friends, family, people around you. Word of mouth is huge. So if you can share any segments from this or just cover a story with them by yourself, that's really big and helps get privacy, security, all these cool things we talk about in people's minds, especially on podcast apps. You guys have been really leaving a lot of nice reviews. So we really appreciate seeing those. Definitely give us some ratings if you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. We were just at an event in Krakow, and one of the people said that they discovered us organically on Spotify. Like just someone we were talking to who didn't know we were going to be there. Probably they were just like, oh yeah, like I listened to your podcast, and they showed us.
See, that's where I walked up. So
yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they showed the phone, and they're like, look, I'm subscribed. And I said, oh, like how'd you find us? And she said, oh no, it was just like suggested to me organically by Spotify. So it does work. Nice. Like when you guys engage with this stuff, it really does find individuals. So yeah, that's all I have. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.